Steelers Nation, everything around the Pittsburgh Steelers right now comes down to urgency, timing, and the reality that the season is literally sitting on one final division game. This is not hype, this is not exaggeration, this is the cold truth heading into a winner-goes-to-the-playoffs matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. The Steelers are making moves, real moves, because they understand exactly what is at stake, and it starts with a tough piece of news that hit the locker room this week. Darnell Washington, the starting tight end, is done for the year after suffering a broken arm in the loss to the Cleveland Browns. Surgery followed, injured reserve followed, and suddenly a key piece of the Steelers' jumbo run packages is gone. That is not a small loss, especially against a Ravens team that lives in the trenches. In response, the Steelers immediately adjusted. Jaheim Bell was signed to the practice squad to provide depth at tight end, but the more meaningful move came along the offensive line. Jack Driscoll was signed to the active 53-man roster, and this is not just a paperwork transaction. This is a team acknowledging how thin the offensive line has become and choosing experience over hope. Driscoll has championship pedigree, having spent 5 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, appearing in 67 games with 18 starts, and even starting a game for a Super Bowl winning team. With the Steelers dealing with attrition up front and relying on players like Dylan Cook, who has admirably exceeded expectations, adding a player with Driscoll's resume matters more than people might initially think. Now layer that on top of a moment. The Steelers lost on Sunday, and that single loss turned the AFC North into a final week coin flip. This game was flexed into a national evening slot because it means everything. With Washington out, the offense has to adapt, and that likely puts more responsibility on Pat Freiermuth, both as a receiver and as a stabilizing presence. The passing game has already been dealing with challenges, and the absence of DK Metcalf due to suspension only tightens the margin for error. Still, there's belief inside the building that this Ravens defense is vulnerable, and that belief is not coming from outside noise, it is coming from within the team itself. That internal confidence showed up in a big way through an unexpected voice. Rookie defensive tackle Derek Harmon does not speak often, but when he does, people listen. His message before this game cut straight through the emotion of last week's loss. Do not let a loss hit your heart. Do not let a win hit your head. Just play ball, because this is the season. His focus immediately turned to stopping Derrick Henry, and rightfully so, after Henry demolished Green Bay for over 200 yards. That is leadership emerging at exactly the right time, and it resonated not just in the locker room, but with the fan base as well. Harmon was not alone. Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers quarterback, delivered one of his most confident stretches of commentary since arriving in Pittsburgh. Love him or not, his presence has mattered. He spoke about how blessed this team is, how focused he is on this week, and yet he also opened the door slightly when talking about his future. At 42 years old, on a 1-year deal, he acknowledged that free agency awaits whenever the season ends. He praised the organization, the city, and the experience, calling it even better than he hoped for. That kind of buy-in matters when you are staring down a season-defining game. The defense echoed that mindset. Patrick Queen spoke about how competitors are wired for moments like this, and Malik Harrison, freshly back from injury, added even more weight to it. Harrison knows this rivalry from both sides, having spent 4 seasons with the Ravens, and he made it clear that games like this define what it means to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is about the city, the standard, and proving that this team can make noise in the playoffs, not just sneak in. Across the field, Baltimore brings its own uncertainty. Lamar Jackson returned to practice after missing time with a back contusion, and his status is still being monitored. Whether it is Jackson or Snoop Huntley, the Steelers are preparing for both. Huntley has shown he can be efficient in must-win games, while Jackson, dealing with lingering injuries, has not looked like the same explosive runner this season. That reality quietly shapes how Pittsburgh views this matchup, even if no one will say it publicly. So here we are. Roster moves, leadership emerging, injuries testing depth, and a season hanging in the balance. This does not feel like just another Steelers-Ravens game. This feels heavier. It feels like a crossroads moment where identity, resilience, and belief all collide on one field, on one night. With all of this on the table, how confident are you in the Steelers' ability to rise in this moment and prove who they really are when everything is on the line? The deeper you look into this matchup, the clearer it becomes that this is not about schemes on a whiteboard or headlines outside the building. It is about how this roster has absorbed pressure all season long and whether it can channel it one more time. The Steelers have been shorthanded before, they have been doubted before, and they have been counted out before, yet they continue to put themselves in position to matter when it counts. That does not happen by accident. It happens because there is a core belief inside this locker room that the standard still means something, even when the path is messy. Losing Darnell Washington changes how the offense functions. There is no sugarcoating that. Those heavy packages, the extra gap, the physical tone he helped set in the run game, that is not easily replaced. But this is where adaptability becomes the story. Pat Freiermuth now steps into a bigger spotlight, not just as a target but as a tone setter, and the Steelers are clearly betting that experience and football intelligence can offset raw size in critical moments. This also places even more importance on the offensive line holding up, which circles right back to why the Jack Driscoll signing matters more than fans might initially realize. This team is trying to survive a war of attrition, and every veteran snap matters in a game like this. What stands out most, though, is the emotional balance the Steelers are trying to strike. Derek Harmon's message was not accidental. This team knows how dangerous emotional swings can be in rivalry games. Too tight, and mistakes happen. Too loose, and urgency disappears. Harmon talking about keeping losses out of the heart and wins out of the head is the kind of mindset you hear from teams that understand playoff football is different. Add to that voices like Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison, players who have lived inside this rivalry, and you start to see a locker room aligning mentally as much as physically. Aaron Rodgers' role in all of this cannot be ignored either. His comments about his future may make some fans uneasy, but what matters most right now is how locked in he appears to be on this week. Teammates listen when a quarterback with his resume speaks, and his praise for the organization and the city was not empty. It reinforces the idea that this is not a temporary stop, but a meaningful chapter. Whether this is his final season or not is irrelevant at kickoff. What matters is that the huddle believes in the man taking the snaps when the noise is loudest. On the other side, the Ravens bring uncertainty at the most important position on the field. Lamar Jackson's health, Snoop Huntley's efficiency, and Derrick Henry's dominance all create different challenges. The Steelers understand that preparation cannot be one-dimensional. This defense has to be disciplined, gap-sound, and mentally sharp for 4 quarters. There is no room for hero ball. This is about 11 men doing their job, snap after snap, and trusting that the cumulative effect will tilt the game. This is why this moment feels so familiar to Steelers fans. The season narrows, the margin disappears, and somehow it comes down to one game against a rival that knows you better than anyone else. There are no secrets here. There is only execution, toughness, and belief. The Steelers have clawed their way to this point, and now they have a chance to define what this season will be remembered for, not by narratives, but by performance. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe this version of the Steelers has what it takes to win this game and carry real momentum into the playoffs? Or does this matchup expose the limits of this roster? Drop your thoughts in the comments, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit that like button if you want daily Steelers coverage, and keep your eyes on the screen for the next video as we continue breaking down everything surrounding this season-defining moment. What makes this stretch so compelling is that it strips everything down to fundamentals. No future contracts, no offseason debates, no long-term hypotheticals. Just a football team that has fought through injuries, inconsistency, and outside doubt, now standing in a position where 90 minutes can reshape the entire perception of the year. That is the weight this game carries, and the players feel it just as much as the fans do. You can see it in how carefully the Steelers are handling their roster decisions. Nothing feels rushed or panicked, but nothing feels passive either. Moving Jack Driscoll onto the 53-man roster is a signal that they expect this game to be physical and demanding in the trenches. It is an acknowledgement that depth is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. When you reach this point in the season, survival often comes down to who still has functional bodies ready to play meaningful snaps, not just stars at the top of the depth chart. Defensively, the messaging has been consistent and deliberate. Stop the run, stay disciplined, and force the Ravens to earn everything. Derrick Henry looms over this matchup like a shadow, and everyone in the building knows that if he controls the game early, the night becomes much longer. That is why Derek Harmon's words matter. They are not about hype, they are about composure. You cannot chase plays against Baltimore. You cannot freelance. You have to trust structure, even when the moment feels bigger than the snap in front of you. Offensively, the challenge is different but just as demanding. Without Darnell Washington, the Steelers lose a piece of their physical identity, but they also gain clarity. The offense has to be efficient, intentional, and smart with opportunities. That means winning on early downs, protecting the quarterback, and converting when chances appear. It also means leaning into leadership. Pat Freiermuth, Aaron Rodgers, and the veteran core understand that this is the kind of game where one mistake can flip momentum instantly. There's also something important happening between this team and its fan base right now. You can feel the tension, but you can also feel the belief. Steelers fans know this script. It is uncomfortable, it is stressful, and it rarely comes easy, but it is familiar. This franchise has built its identity on surviving moments exactly like this. That does not guarantee anything on the field, but it does create an emotional edge that cannot be dismissed. When the ball is kicked off, none of the context will matter anymore. Injuries, quotes, roster moves, and speculation all fade into the background. What remains is execution, toughness, and resolve. The Steelers have put themselves in position to decide their own fate, and that alone says something about who they are, even with all the flaws and limitations that exist. At this stage, what defines this team is not perfection, it is resistance. Every time the season has threatened to slip away, the Steelers have responded by narrowing their focus and leaning into what they still do well. That is why this moment feels like a final exam of everything they have been building, even through the uneven stretches. This is not about playing pretty football. This is about playing functional, resilient football when the opponent knows exactly what you want to do. You can feel how much the veterans understand that reality. There is a calm seriousness around the way this game is being approached. No one is promising style points. No one is talking about statements. The language is about surviving 4 quarters, winning situational battles, and stacking small victories until the scoreboard reflects it. Third downs, red zone possessions, field position, tackling, ball security. These are the details that decide rivalry games in January-like conditions, and the Steelers know it. This is also where coaching discipline quietly comes into play. With the margin this thin, there is no room for emotional penalties, blown assignments, or lapses in communication. The Ravens thrive on capitalizing when opponents lose structure. The Steelers' response has been to emphasize trust and accountability. Do your job, trust the man next to you, and let the game come to you. It sounds simple, but simplicity under pressure is one of the hardest things to execute in football. For the fans, this is the emotional crossroads of the season. Win, and everything feels justified. The injuries, the frustration, the ugly wins, the narrow escapes, they all become part of a survival story that leads into the playoffs with belief. Lose, and the conversation changes instantly. Then it becomes about what could have been, what needs to change, and where the ceiling truly is. That is why this game feels so heavy. It does not just end a season, it defines it. What makes this even more powerful is that the Steelers are not asking for help. There are no scoreboard watches, no complex scenarios. Win, and you're in. Lose, and you're out. That clarity is brutal, but it is also liberating. It strips away excuses. It puts ownership squarely on the men in that locker room. This is why, when people talk about Steelers football, they talk about moments like this. Not because they are always comfortable, but because they demand resolve. This team has one last opportunity to prove that its identity is more than history and slogans, that it still exists in real time, under real pressure. When you zoom out and look at the full arc of this season, what stands out is how often the Steelers have been forced to define themselves in uncomfortable situations. There was never a long stretch where everything clicked perfectly. Instead, it has been a constant test of adaptability, patience, and mental toughness. That is why this final game does not feel random. It feels earned. Earned through surviving weeks where the roster was stretched thin, where execution had to outweigh talent gaps, and where belief mattered as much as play design. This is also where the idea of leadership becomes tangible. Leadership is not speeches alone. It is behavior under stress. It is how players respond after a bad series, a missed tackle, or a drive that stalls. The Steelers have been intentional about reinforcing that mindset all week. One snap does not define you. One mistake does not end you. But repeated lapses will bury you. That balance between urgency and composure is exactly what separates teams that crumble from teams that endure. There is no mystery about what Baltimore will try to do. They will test the edges, lean on physicality, and try to shorten the game. They will wait for impatience. The Steelers' challenge is not to outsmart that plan, but to outlast it. Win first down. Keep the playbook open. Force the Ravens to play left-handed football when possible. These are the quiet battles that decide whether the fourth quarter becomes survival mode or opportunity. Offensively, the Steelers do not need fireworks. They need control. Control of tempo. Control of possession. Control of emotion. This is where experience at quarterback matters, especially when drives stall and the crowd tightens. The ability to reset, to take points when they are available, and to avoid the backbreaking mistake is everything in a game like this. Field goals are not failures in January football. Sometimes they are anchors that keep you steady until the moment to strike arrives. For the defense, the task is even more unforgiving. Every missed gap, every poor angle, every moment of hesitation can flip momentum instantly. That is why discipline is non-negotiable. You are not chasing highlights. You are building walls. If the Steelers can force Baltimore to earn yards in small, controlled increments, frustration begins to creep in. And when frustration shows up, opportunity follows. This is the emotional trade the Steelers are making. Accept discomfort now for the chance at meaning later. Accept pressure now for the reward of extending the season. Nothing about this path has been easy, but nothing about Steelers football ever is when it matters most. What also cannot be ignored in this moment is how thin the line is between confidence and overexposure. The Steelers understand that if they fall behind early, this becomes a very different type of game. That is why the opening quarter matters more than people want to admit. It is not about scoring first for style. It is about establishing that the night will be played on Pittsburgh's terms, shortening the game, controlling pace, and forcing Baltimore to feel every snap physically and mentally. This is where preparation meets restraint. There's a quiet edge to this team right now that feels different from desperation. It feels deliberate. Players are not talking about miracles or destiny. They are talking about assignments, leverage, angles, and trust. That is often how you can tell a team knows exactly where it stands. They are not pretending to be something they are not. They are leaning into who they actually are. A team that survives through structure, effort, and situational discipline. This is also where the cumulative effect of the season shows up. All those close games, all those late drives, all those fourth quarter moments where execution mattered, they have built a kind of scar tissue. Scar tissue is not pretty, but it is strong. It allows teams to stay functional when the game tightens. The Steelers have lived in that space all year, and now they are being asked to do it one more time with everything on the line. The Ravens will test that resolve relentlessly. They will probe for impatience, force difficult decisions, and wait for cracks. That is what good teams do in elimination games. The Steelers' response has to be calm repetition. Do it again, and again, and again. Make Baltimore earn every inch until frustration becomes visible. When that happens, that is when opportunities appear, often suddenly and decisively. There is something symbolic about this matchup arriving here, at this point in the season. No cushion, no safety net, just the rivalry, the history, and the present moment colliding. This is not about what the Steelers were supposed to be. It is about what they are willing to be right now. Tough, patient, relentless.